Hey folks, how are you? My name's Joel. Myself and Phil will be coming over to join you at the end of the month, which is really just a couple of weeks, really, a few days from now. Delighted to be with you then, and yeah, can't wait to see what happens. Heard some awesome things about you guys and what you're up to. I just wanted to send a short video to talk about radical hospitality and what it means to be people of radical hospitality in the middle of our cities and of our towns. I'm doing this video from the middle of our town, Coleraine, and what I think about when I think about that is the start of the book of Acts, and there are two things that we see there. At the start of Acts, Jesus says to his friends, his followers, he says that the Holy Spirit is going to fill them with power to be his witnesses in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and then to the ends of the earth. And if you're like me, maybe you've heard before people say things about that verse, and they'll say things like, this started as something that was Jerusalem, it was local to the disciples, it was something that they knew, it was a place that they would have been around a lot, it would have been people that they would have maybe seen often on the streets, and then it would have gone out wider to their region, and then it would have continued to go out into the ends of the earth. So it started locally, it started in places and streets and neighborhoods that would have been familiar to them. And then you do see that later on. You see two of the disciples walking through a street that they would have walked through fairly often, past people that maybe they would have seen begging frequently, and they stop and they pray for somebody who was paralyzed, and he gets healed, and they share the good news of Jesus with him. This is the first thing that I see in this, is that when we're people of radical hospitality, it changes how we see those around us every day. It changes the sorts of people that we would come across every day. It changes how we see the people that we would have come across every day. Because I think those two disciples would have walked past that man fairly frequently. They would have seen him before. But then they've been filled with the empowering presence of the Holy Spirit. And they have a message of hope to carry. So what it looks like for them to walk past that man is very different now. They become people of radical hospitality, and they witness to the presence of Jesus in that city. They witness to the fact that Jesus is there. So they're welcoming him into a new life, a new way of being in that city. And so for me, I think about this when myself and a few friends walk out of the church building once or twice every week, and we just walk into the city and we ask God, would you show us who it is that you have for us to meet, to be kind to encourage, to welcome into our city, to bless. Would you put them in our path? Who is it that you have for us to meet that we can share a kind word with? Maybe we can pray for them. So we walked up to the train station last Thursday, and as we walked up, there was a man outside, and the very first person that we met, we got chatting with, turned out that he had just moved here with his daughter, and he was looking for a new start in life. We got to share with him the fact that there's a new start available in life for him in Jesus, all that meant. And it turned out that, as he said to us, this is exactly what he'd been looking for. He said he was 100% ready to give his life to Jesus, and that this is actually a path that God had been leading him towards for a while. And so enthusiastically, wholeheartily, he said yes to following Jesus. And this is the first person that we met as we left the church building and said, God, would you show us who it is that you're working in the city, that you're leading to yourself. And so we got to be people who welcomed him with radical hospitality, not just to the city of Coleraine, but also to the witness to the presence of Jesus in Coleraine and the new life for him. And then the second thing I think that we find when we want to be people of radical hospitality is that it spreads and it does get messy. Remember, we walked into the path of a couple of people, not on the train station, the other side of town, the other side of Coleraine, a year and a half ago, and this was when the lockdowns were still in effect. And we met this couple, and we felt the Holy Spirit's leading to pray for healing for the man. And the man was completely healed of a back problem, and the wife had been pretty resistant, pretty incredulous to this, but she began to believe that this was God. And as we talked to both of them, she actually ended up giving her life to Jesus in that moment. Because it was the lockdowns, we didn't actually meet. They didn't come along to a church service in person. In fact, they didn't really know that church existed, because at that point it was all online. But I bumped into them a year later, and as it turned out, the man had no longer followed Jesus, but his partner, this lady, had been sharing the good news of Jesus on her street. She had been leading people on her street towards Jesus. She'd been praying for them, for people who were addicts in her neighborhood. She'd been starting little meetings with women on her street where they talked about Jesus, where they shared stories about Jesus. And she'd been going and getting help for her own sickness, for her own conditions. With doctors nearby, her life had been getting better, and it had begun to spread to those on her street. All of this without ever actually coming along to a physical church service or being part of a church yet in her life. And she got to find out about that in that second meeting. But the incredible thing about that is she began to be somebody who was radically hospitable to those on her street with the good news of Jesus, with the witness to the power, the transforming power of the Holy Spirit, without ever actually having walked through the doors of a church building. And that is the power of what we carry. That's the power of the Holy Spirit in us. It's the power of the message of the gospel, that we become people who welcome others into it in our cities, and then they go on and they begin to share that message and that transforming power with those around them. So I'd encourage you guys, just before me and Phil come over to join you guys, I want to encourage you guys with a couple of questions. And the first one is this: what might that look like for you today to be somebody of radical hospitability? That's the word. What might that look like today in your neighborhood? And then secondly, what might it look like for those in your community group this year? So can't wait to talk more and meet with you guys in a couple of weeks. I'll see you soon.